By daylight, this field may still look normal. But after just one night, by the next morning, the soil has been torn apart in patches, roots ripped upward, empty spaces left behind as if something passed through and swept away every ounce of hard work. What worries them is not only the scale of destruction, but the fact that it returns almost every night, consistent, relentless, and unpredictable. And that is the sign that if no action is taken in time, an entire harvest could disappear. That is exactly why our team is here again, to install traps strong enough and solid enough to hold the line. Without wasting time, we completed the first net trap that same day on the southern edge of the forest. Before long, it gave its first signal. One boar had been caught inside, but instead of staying contained, it reacted violently, charging straight into the netted gate again and again. The mesh stretched tight, shaking wildly with every impact. The decision was made immediately after that. We would not dismantle the old trap, but we would no longer rely on this type of system. At once, on the northern side of the forest, where the terrain was tighter and more enclosed, a different setup was built. A steel door trap, heavier frame, stronger locks, a gravity drop gate that did not depend on tension like netting. It only needed to be strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a herd of wild boars. When everything was ready, we waited in silence for nightfall. The tension in the air was so thick that no one said a word. Then the first movement appeared. The smell of bait quickly drew in the herd. And when the moment came, when every last one had stepped inside, click, the trigger was activated. The gate dropped shut. Inside, several boars reacted instantly. They burst into frantic motion, searching for an escape. But every direction was sealed. Metal rang out in sharp beats. Short, clean, final. We looked at one another. For the first time, the trap had worked exactly as intended. At another point near the forest edge, the reinforced trap set by Tom did not take long to activate either. Though it caught only a few, it would still reduce the damage to this season's crops for the local farmers. Once the trap was sprung, the boars tried to escape by instinct. But that was impossible. They had been fully contained inside the solid structure we had spent so much effort preparing. And it did not stop there. Texas is home to more than 3 million feral hogs. So together with landowners, we often place traps like these out in the fields. The trap in this area became another hotspot, stirring up noise at the edge of the woods. When large, powerful boars were found contained inside, it proved one thing clearly. The system was working exactly as we had planned. Every time a trap was triggered, we did not rush to celebrate. But at the very least, everyone felt a little more at ease. The traps continued to be reinforced. We continued the control operation. This time, we were determined to catch every last one, to leave them no chance to damage this area again. Every year, our state of Texas alone suffers around $400, $500 million in economic losses caused by wild hogs. This final night was considered the decisive one. Once again, we took our positions, held our breath, and waited. At the first trap, the herd had grown larger. Not only adults, but smaller ones as well entered the enclosure. The space inside began to tighten. Then, at the perfect moment, the trap let out a chilling clack. Instantly, movement inside became faster, more violent, more desperate. Heavy blows slammed into the steel frame. Metal rang out sharply. Others circled and shoved. The entire trap shook in waves. But this time, just like the night before, not a single one escaped. We kept watching, kept waiting, and then, everything reached its peak. A massive herd appeared, not scattered individuals anymore, but a dense, moving flood. They fed greedily on the bait scattered across the ground until BM, the gate crashed down. At once, the trap exploded with noise inside. Feet pounding the dirt, steel bars rattling without pause. And in that moment, we understood more clearly than ever. If the trap system had not been strong enough, everything would have burst apart. The next morning, we did not dismantle the trap right away, because we knew there was still more out there, and we were right. Another large herd had been caught just before dawn. When we walked past, they became even more agitated. Several slammed into the steel frame so hard the entire trap shook repeatedly. And do you know what was inside that cage? The very reason those fields have been destroyed for weeks. As everything gradually came under control, the farm grew quiet again. No more fresh tracks each morning. No more furrows torn open after every night. This was not a hunt. This was the only way to save the harvest. Because once wild boars discover a stable food source, they do not stop on their own. In situations like this, what do you think matters more? A trap strong enough, or the patience to wait for the perfect moment? Leave your thoughts below. I have followed quite a few wild boar control teams in the southern United States, but rarely has my heart pounded the way it did that night. That evening, we set traps at the edge of the forest with only one goal: to keep the community and the crops safe. The image that remains deeply etched in my mind, even now, is this: a herd of wild boars circling frantically inside the steel trap frame. The sounds of heavy impacts echoing again and again through the dark forest. The net trembling under the instinctive force of wild animals pushing against it. And it all started from something very real. For many nights in a row, the farmers' fields had been torn up so badly that they could no longer sleep peacefully. That afternoon, the team split into 3 groups. Our group chose an open patch of ground along a trail, the path where the herd usually moves from the forest down into the fields. The damp soil still held deep hoof marks. Their tracks were still very fresh. We decided to use a large circular steel net trap designed to capture the entire herd. These traps were made of hardened, rust-resistant steel, strong enough to withstand the powerful charges of wild boars weighing up to 1,000 pounds. At this point, you might be wondering why we chose this type of trap instead of others, right? The villagers had already tried several different methods, but they were ineffective, only catching 1 or 2 animals. After that, the herd only became more cautious. That was when we realized we needed a stronger and more reliable steel trap to deal with the herd. The trap system began to take shape. Steel stakes as thick as a wrist were driven deep into the ground. Heavy rolls of wire mesh were pulled out, the tight pattern woven thick and rigid like armor. Ethan and I held the net straight and tight against the ground while Mark used a sledgehammer to secure every anchor point. The sharp clang of metal striking metal echoed dryly through the forest. Every joint had to be absolutely secure. Just one small gap, and a full-grown wild boar weighing over 300 pounds could destroy the entire system. Inside the circle of netting, we placed bait, fermented corn, and molasses. The scent drifted through the humid air, drawing the herd from far away. When the final section of net was secured, the forest fell silent. Around 11 p.m., we sat inside a truck cabin nearly half a kilometer away from the trap, watching through the cameras. At first, the screen showed nothing but pale gray tree trunks. Then the atmosphere suddenly changed. The air seemed to grow heavier. A dark shape slowly stepped into view. My heart skipped. The herd of wild boars was approaching the trap with great caution. They emerged from the forest edge like heavy shadows, their snouts close to the ground as they sniffed the air. "Wow, that's a lot," Ethan whispered. "Not just a few. More than 20 animals slowly moved toward the bait area." I held my breath. One step forward, then the entire herd followed. We watched in silence, holding our breath as Mark pressed the trigger button. In an instant, the steel net dropped from behind, sealing the circle. A deep, muffled roar erupted. The herd startled. They had lost their caution and fallen straight into the trap. Then everything exploded. The ground was torn apart. The steel net shook violently. Massive bodies slammed into the mesh and panic. Chaos echoed through the forest. Piercing squeals, harsh metallic crashes, and the strained whine of tension amplifies. One large boar charged straight into the edge of the net. The steel bent slightly, then snapped back into place. It refused to give up, leaping against the mesh in an attempt to escape. But the 6-foot-high net gave it no chance. The anchor stakes remained firmly in place. "Hold your positions. Let them tire themselves out," Mark signaled. But before we could even recover from the moment, our radio crackled with shouts from the other two groups. "The trap over here just dropped too. Not just one location. Every trap our team had set had worked." We approached the trap once the herd had begun to tire. Up close, their size was even more striking. Muscles rippled across their shoulders. Their snouts bore old scars. Their breath steamed in the cold mist. The lead boar still refused to surrender. It circled the enclosure, its large nose sniffing for a weakness. I could feel the tension tightening in my chest. This was not just a hunt. This was a confrontation between humans and the raw survival instincts of the wild. Following local regulations and humane principles, each animal was handled quickly to avoid prolonged suffering. The work was careful and closely coordinated. Gradually, the forest returned to silence. When the sun rose above the tree line, a thin mist lay over the steel nets still damp with the scent of earth. The other teams reported their success one by one. All 3 trap sites had captured entire herds. Villagers came to see. No one cheered loudly, but their eyes shone with relief and quiet joy. "At least this season, we can still save what's left," one farmer said. The dogs that had come with them seemed to share in the moment. They ran circles outside the trap, barking loudly as if still pushing the boars into a corner. I looked around, men and women who had spent sleepless nights worrying about their fields. Last night was not just about hunting. It was an act to protect the livelihoods and safety of an entire community. As we packed up the equipment, Ethan suddenly called me over. At the edge of the trail, in the soft soil, another footprint was clearly visible. Bigger, deeper. Mark crouched down and studied it for a long moment. Could be the oldest one in the herd. It never entered the trap. I turned to look toward the dark forest in the distance. The sense of relief slowly gave way to another thought. This fight might not be over yet. There's still wild boars out there, waiting to come back. This place had been ravaged by wild boars many times. Fields were torn apart, fences broken down, and the damage repeated season after season. Small traps only managed to catch a few animals, while the rest of the herd quickly learned to avoid them and became more cunning with time. We could no longer deal with the problem in scattered ways. Together with the farmers in the area, we agreed to build a large trap, strong enough to capture the entire herd at once. It was a collective decision by the whole community to put an end to the long chain of destruction. As evening approached, while the sunlight was still strong enough, we began building the trap. Heavy steel mesh panels were carried out and assembled into a tightly sealed circle. Each joint was tightened carefully and driven deep into the dry ground. The sound of hammers striking metal echoed sharply through the quiet air. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a cold iron frame. But in reality, it was a giant lock waiting for the right moment to close. Once the trap enclosure was secured, we installed infrared cameras around the area, mounting them high on tree trunks to monitor the entire trail leading inside. Everything was done quickly and carefully. We minimized human traces and left early so that our scent could fade away in the wind. The final step was baiting the trap. Bags of corn were opened, their sweet scent drifting through the late afternoon air. We scattered the corn to create a faint trail leading gradually toward the center of the trap. The middle was where the bait was placed the heaviest. Step by step, the herd would be drawn deeper inside without realizing it. When everything was finished, the trap area fell silent again. Only the faint smell of corn lingered in the night. And somewhere in the forest, sensitive noses had already begun to catch the scent. When night fell, the forest seemed perfectly still, but none of us truly felt at ease. Then suddenly, movement appeared on the screen. The wild boars had arrived. The large lead so stepped forward first, sniffing the air as she followed the scent of corn. One by one, big and small, the rest of the herd slowly moved toward the trap. Wild boars possess powerful survival instincts and sharp awareness of their surroundings. But tonight, hunger and the sweet smell of corn outweighed any danger they might have sensed. Guided by the leader, the others followed behind. Without suspicion, without hesitation, they rushed in to enjoy the food. When we were certain the entire herd was inside the trap, suddenly,